Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily for January 30th, 2025. Coming up, the Thunder lost to the Warriors. Come on, man. I got Sam Amick to update us on De'Aaron Fox and his whole trade situation. And we got Law Murray to talk about the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard, Zubac, and if they're going to make a trade. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Zena. Zena, we watched the end of the Thunder and Warriors game, and it struck me funny that we were watching the Warriors win this game. It makes no sense that they won. There's no Draymond Green. Steph Curry is kind of banged up. He scored
There's
4
no
points
Jonathan
in the
Kuminga.
first. Yeah.
Right?
What
There's
happened?
no scores. The anchor of the defense is not there. It is wild that on a night where Jalen Brunson drops 30 in a win, Kristaps Porzingis drops 34 in a win, Pascal Siakam drops 37 in a win, and we're not even talking about them. We're talking about SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the phenom out of Canada, dropping 52 points in an L.
In a loss. He scored,
To the 23 and 23
right?
Warriors. Now
So he had
24 and 23 Warriors.
He had 54, what was that, last week? So it's his second 50-point game. They mentioned on the broadcast that he only has 7 games of 40 or more points this season.
Do more, Shai.
Right, yeah, please score some more. But look, let's talk about the Warriors side of this, because the second half, it was like a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde. The Thunder get out to a nice lead. Steph Curry scores 4 points in the first half, and you start thinking, hey, this is maybe they're going to be waving the white flag kind of early. But Steph got hot, and so hot, he hit a 35-footer after the buzzer, kind of out of rhythm toward the end of this game. Like, it was one of those things. I wonder if the Thunder, none of the players remember what it was like to be in those battles, but I wonder if there's people in the Thunder organization that just every time they see Steph touch a basketball, they get like flashbacks. It's like PTSD.
I'm sure there's a little PTSD on the Thunder side. There's PTSD all around the league when it comes to like Steph Curry getting hot. And what's so obvious is that when he gets hot, he injects life into the Warriors, because not only did he get hot and start making abnormal threes, abnormal for other people, not
abnormal for everybody else.
But it also picked up the pace of the game. You saw the Warriors start exchanging buckets with OKC in a way that most teams aren't able to keep up with OKC. At one point, there was literally 24 points for the Warriors, 8 points only for OKC. Yeah. They ended up winning that quarter 36-26, but that's when the tides shifted for the Warriors. They were feeling themselves. There was a crazy dunk, GP2 over Isaiah Hartenstein. I am still out of my body thinking about that body dunk. Like, he bodied him, but that was the essence of the way that the Warriors were playing in the second half.
Yeah, it was a great game from Andrew Wiggins. I mean, they just got they got enough from everybody. It was another one of these games where, Steve Kerr rolls out 11 guys and none of them are stars except for Steph. And somehow they win this game. And this is why we're all thinking, oh, the trade deadline, if they could just get a guy, if they could somehow manifest, I don't know, Cam Johnson even.
Or maybe no moves because the guy you need is on the bench, hurt.
Maybe.
Jonathan Kuminga, before he went out, was averaging about 20 points in those last few games, especially in January.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the Warriors don't need to make a move. Maybe they just need to be patient.
Health will help them for sure. To get into what other teams might do, here's my little sit down with Sam Amick from earlier today. The trade deadline is a week away, so we had to get our workhorse in here. Sam Amick, the Athletics national NBA insider, our NBA insider. Sam, De'Aaron Fox has just thrown a wrench in the entire trade deadline for everybody.
He has indeed, Dave. Big news. We did see this coming. We've been tracking this for quite a few months. De'Aaron's discontent, if you will, or more specifically, just his concern for his own long-term future in Sacramento. And does this team have a high enough ceiling to warrant him signing a long-term deal? He's got 1 year left on this current contract, has declined multiple extensions, was eligible for the Supermax if he, was an all-NBA player. That does not appear to be the track that he is on at the moment. But admittedly, a little bit for me, surprised that this ended up popping off before the trade deadline. It had seemed like this was going to become a summertime offseason thing.
Right.
The Kings make the coaching change going from Mike Brown to Doug Christie. And there was a lot of, Fox negativity within that, meaning that, like I've written, he didn't pull the trigger on the Brown deal. In fact, he went to dinner with Mike after the coaching change, and it seemed like the Kings went one way while De'Aaron was thinking another, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But still, they won a bunch of games, and you thought that it had quieted down enough that it would become an offseason thing. But that's not the case. You could argue that the time should be now for the Kings in terms of maximizing his value. The entire league seems to know that the Spurs are the destination that he's looking at. But we'll see what happens here.
Well, the Spurs shouldn't necessarily be in any rush to make a move like this, right? Like, it's a little bit early in their process, but I can understand if you're De'Aaron Fox wanting to get there, especially with the ramifications of the contract extension that he would be entitled to. But outside of the Spurs, are there other teams that are, an option to go and get Fox that you've heard of?
Well, it's interesting to keep it in Texas, and we've been hearing this for a while. Houston, I think if this thing gets to the summertime, Houston might revisit the idea of thinking about De'Aaron Fox, but they are not doing that during the season. They are obviously playing fantastic basketball. They're second in the West. Their plan that they are going to stick to is to get to the end of this season and then monitor what they think of their current group and then go from there. So in that scenario, maybe Fox comes into play, not right now. The Lakers, I'm told, are not a place that De'Aaron or his camp is trying to push him towards, even with the connections between Fox's agent, Rich Paul of Clutch Sports, LeBron James, Anthony Davis. This is a whole different conversation, but probably not a great sign for the Lakers that the Clutch camp looks at their operation and says, no, let's go elsewhere with a young all-star level talent. But again, that's a conversation for another day. Orlando comes to mind. They have interest in Fox. They've been doing some due diligence on him for quite some time, and I think formulating their own opinion. I don't know, if they're jumping in immediately right now, but it wouldn't shock me. They've had so many injuries this year, and you can tell that they are trying to hold on to all of that positivity that came with the strong start they had, while also trying to figure out how do we take the next step. So Orlando comes to mind. I'm leaving somebody out, but I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you feel like this is a thing? I mean, again, we're a week from the trade deadline.
Yep.
I understand De'Aaron Fox wanting this to happen before the deadline, but is this something where maybe the Kings they're starting the process now and this plays out in the summer when they're probably going to have, even though I think he's the best player available right now for long term that you can go and trade for that we know of. But in the summer, maybe you have more of a bidding war?
Perhaps. And it is very difficult to get these teams to a place, to your point, midseason to pull something like this off. Again, I already said, Houston's out of the running because midseason doesn't work for them. The other two teams that I was blanking on, Miami and the Clippers, are frequently mentioned with Fox. Now the Miami thing, that's kind of interesting. You never know. We could see, does a Fox and Butler situation kind of run headlong into one another? I think whatever the Butler situation ends up being is potentially a 3, 4, 5 team deal. Tough to put together, but you have two big time pieces in Butler and Fox now in play. But yes, to your question, the summertime is easier logistically, but the question becomes, do the Kings lose leverage by that point? Because, I don't love the gun to the head analogy, but it's just the point gets across. It's even more intense in the summer where you are running out of time. You absolutely, for a small market franchise like the Kings, you cannot run the risk of losing Fox for nothing. And I'll also say that if you think about the Kings' history with this front office, with Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox, when they traded for Domantas Sabonis with the Pacers, they shocked the world by moving Tyrese Halliburton. That was kind of ahead of a timeline that people did not see coming. I think they have shown a willingness to do something and strike while the iron is hot, even if, it causes waves publicly. And as a quick aside to that, during that time, Halliburton got moved because he was the guy with the value. You know what I mean? Fox got floated at that time, but back then his contract was something that most teams didn't have interest in. He was not as good as he is now, and he had a lot more time left on that deal. And I share that to kind of remind folks that while Fox, the perception of him now is he's one of the franchise centerpieces, and that is true. But it was not that long ago that even De'Aaron himself knew that he might be in play, with the team being the ones potentially motivated to move him. So, they've been active before. Yeah,
if they wait till the summer, that Jeopardy music starts playing, right? Like right. It just you gotta run up against it. All right, well, let's talk about Jimmy Butler. Is there a chance he winds up in Sacramento? It seems like the Suns' pursuit is cooling off from what I've been reading. What's the latest that you know on Jimmy Butler?
The Jimmy stuff in Miami, it's hot and heavy in all the worst kinds of ways. My goodness, he was back for a couple of hours going to shoot around before he's suspended again. And so the dynamics continue to be so difficult that I do ultimately think that if I'm handicapping it, that Jimmy is going to get moved before the deadline. Phoenix, like you said, continues to look incredibly problematic, even though that's where Jimmy wants to be. The Bradley Beal obstacle remains. So teams like the Kings, teams like the Warriors, I think are going to have to rethink whether or not they want to jump in here because the price on Jimmy is going down. I don't know how much, but it does appear that it is going down. And if you look at the Warriors, for example, before the prospect was, oh, you mean we got to attach a first? We gotta give you Jonathan Kuminga? That's just not happening. And we can't sacrifice our future in that kind of a way. Well, what if you could get Jimmy Butler, with less than that, where maybe Andrew Wiggins was the worst thing that you were giving up or the most valuable thing you were giving up? The Kings are in a similar spot. They want to win now. They're not looking to reset the table here. And I think that there have been for sure indications that they haven't completely kind of left the possibility of going after Jimmy. So I would keep that as kind of an open question. But we're in like phase 2 or phase 3 with the Jimmy stuff.
We're in week 6 of this. This is.
Yeah, but from a negotiating standpoint, there's been a shift behind the scenes. I think where Miami is now realizing we're going to have to lower the asking price. It doesn't mean they're going to say yes to any of this stuff.
Right.
But we just got to see what the market looks like at that point and go from there.
Yeah. And Jimmy Butler, another guy that really wants to get moved for a contract extension that is going to make him a lot more money. I guess before I let you get out of here, the Milwaukee Bucks seem like they are trying to do something. I have heard Zach LaVine as an option. I'm interested in both of those things. I'm interested in the Milwaukee Bucks and their plans and what you think might happen with Zach LaVine.
Zach's a tricky one. It's like, man, one day he wants to be in Chicago. One day he can't wait to get out of Chicago. I'm in that camp, I don't weigh in opinion wise that much because I'm just following the information. But Zach, he's had an incredible year.
He's amazing.
He's amazing. And I actually think, some of these teams we're talking about should go ahead and you're going to roll the dice when it comes to his health. But he has been able to put together a good stretch right now where he's mostly been healthy. Mm-hmm. And it makes a lot of sense to me why Milwaukee would be thinking about it. Chris Middleton is a problem. And I like Chris a lot. But, it's just the difficulties he is having physically, performance-wise, even now that he is back, going scoreless the other night. This is something that the Bucks look at it and like everybody else. And you talk about ceilings, they know, we are not competing with Boston, OKC, Cleveland, any of these teams with this current group. But they are also already so out over their skis from an asset standpoint, all in as much as anybody in the NBA when they made the trade for Damian Lillard that, I think the internal discussion there is my goodness, are we really doing this again? Whether it's LaVine, whether it's Butler, I think those are all real conversations that are being had. And I'm very curious to see what they do because standing pat seems problematic to me.
They're not good enough.
Yeah, you got Giannis to sign the long-term extension, but if they stand pat and they bow out in the first round again, and I know it gets tired from a fan standpoint, but it's we're just going to restart the whole is Giannis happy discussion again.
This is the best this team is going to be, Sam, right? It's only going to get older.
Yeah.
And they don't have any sort of high impact young players that you expect to break out in any significant way. They've got young players who are contributors, but I just feel like they are the team. There's a few teams maybe, but I feel like they are the team in most desperate need of a move. Definitely in the
I'm
East.
with you.
Yeah.
But they don't have, it requires, I think the player wanting to be there.
Right.
Because they don't have much to offer. They can't compete with, we didn't mention Memphis, by the way. That's another good one.
We should. Yeah.
And from an asset standpoint, they can't compete with teams like that. So, but, it was reported that, and it's true, that Jimmy, his camp has sent word, several times to Memphis that he's not interested in playing for the Grizzlies. That was not the case with Milwaukee. So, okay, can you kind of use that to your advantage? The idea that Jimmy might actually want to be here. Can you make that happen with Zach? Does Zach want to be in Milwaukee? So they do need to do something, or else, again, big fella might get a little restless again, but there's a lot to consider.
Everybody's thinking about 2026. Sam Amick, thank you very much. I know you're going to have a busy week. We're going to get you back next week to set up the trade deadline itself. Guys, stick around after the break. Zena and I are going to catch up with Law Murray. Clippers are in San Antonio, and he just released his midseason power rankings. The Clippers have been on a run lately. Kawhi Leonard's back. He looks good. He's playing fourth quarter, so we had to get Law Murray in here ahead of the trade deadline, figure out where the Clippers are, where they've been, where they're going, where their heads are. Law, they survived Wemby. What'd you think?
I think that Kawhi is still that guy. He really is. The last time they saw Victor Wembanyama was New Year's Eve. It was the second night of back-to-back. I was not there, so can't put anything on me. But I'm pretty sure there was a stretch where Wemby outscored the Clippers by himself to begin that game. San Antonio wound up being up by 41. So this was a game that the Clippers put extra attention into. When they beat the Spurs in October, the Spurs were up by 26 at the end of that first quarter. It required that big of a comeback. So this was a much more contested game. The Clippers were up 16 in the third quarter, but the Spurs actually wound up taking a third quarter lead. And what's so thrilling about Kawhi coming back is that it was already like small benchmarks just to get him to debut, right? He's coming back to practice. He's shooting around. He's taking contact. He's getting to be on a road trip. All this before he even put the damn uniform on. Now we're on the other side of the debut. How long can he play? Who is he playing with? Is he running to the corner or, okay, now he's running some pick and rolls. He's getting his ISOs. That's the first mid-range shot he made. That's the first dunk. We saw it. He hit the floor and got up and lived to tell about it. Now, tonight, he just took the Spurs soul. He did it in the third quarter to get that lead. And then when he comes back in the fourth quarter, they jack the lead back up. And then for good measure, he comes in with like a minute left in his restriction and empties the tank yet again. Helped Harden get to 20 points. So that was 4 20-point Clippers. And that's what's fun. Kawhi's only out here because he's healthy. Because he's, not surviving these games, but thriving in these games. And I don't, it's complete basketball. Kawhi is not out there just to score or to be a decoy, a presence. He's out there to do what the Clippers need him to do, given the possession. If it's handle the ball, if it's make the right pass, if it's space, if it's, take on a defensive assignment, he's playing like Kawhi Leonard, the Kawhi Leonard that we've always seen when he's at his best.
What I love about this game was it felt a little bit like a big brother, little brother game. Like the little brother with being the Spurs, with the pace that they had going, they forced a lot of turnovers. You saw them running in transition a lot, but the efficiency, the big brother of Kawhi and James Harden and how they worked off of the screens with Zubac in the middle, Norm Powell, like it just felt as if they were calm and comfortable throughout this entire game. I've actually been shocked at how quickly they've gotten comfortable with Kawhi back on the floor. Have you felt, just a shift in the way that they've incorporated him into their mix?
The thing with Kawhi and Zoo is like he doesn't want to talk about even this part anymore. Like he's a high floor player to go along with a high ceiling player, and what that means is high ceiling. He elevates his teammates and does great things that max players do, right? But he's a high floor player because he just doesn't make mistakes. He's the adult in the room on an old ass team. Okay.
The big brother team, exactly.
So James had 6 turnovers in the first half. Zena, you mentioned that the Spurs were getting out and running. They were pressuring the ball. The Spurs don't pressure the basketball. Like they're a bottom 5 team when it comes to forcing turnovers. And here Jeremy Sohan was on back-to-back possessions, ripping James in the backcourt. The second one finished with an and one. I don't even think he made the free throw, but still, crowd gets hype. And one, stop the game, put the replay up, everybody line up. You know what I mean? Right? James goes into halftime and he apologized. And we've had this thing all season with T. Lou where it's like, you tell these guys they turn the ball over too much. And it's like, you show them, you tell them, and they just say facts and go on with their day, right?
Fair.
James,
yeah.
So James, he goes in at halftime and he took, responsibility, accountability. And it's great when guys say it, but it's even better when they actually implement it. James didn't have a turnover in the second half. The Clippers operated like they were playing a bottom 5 turnover defense in the second half. They only had 6 turnovers. That was huge. And so I'm not surprised because Kawhi's easy to play with. There's a reason his win percentage over the course of his career is as high as it is. He had a great example set in the city of San Antonio, and he's carried that as he's grown his individual game. He always brings his team along with him. That's why he's worth it. That's why, and when I say worth it, I know that correlation, that connotation always comes down to, guys who have attitude issues or guys who just, personality wise, you need to make adjustments. Kawhi is not that person. We all know what the only challenge with Kawhi Leonard is: availability, keeping him on the floor. He's worth it because when he's on the floor, he knows what he has to do, but he's not satisfied with what he has to do. It's raising the level of his teammates. And he's done that. At the very least, he's done that for the 4 guys that he shared the floors with.
He's one of a handful of guys that in a potential run to the finals, he could be the best player in every single series, right? Like you can't say that about more than 5 or 6 guys. And Kawhi, as good as he looks now, he looks just as good as he did right before he got hurt, where we were saying, hey, maybe Kawhi's still one of the 5 or 6 best players in the world. So this run, they don't get to this point where they're this competitive without all the other guys. James Harden, we talked about him extensively on the show and how great he's been, that 40-point game he had the other day. Norm Powell making a strong all-star case, in my opinion, because, that scoring load that he's taken on in Kawhi's absence has been huge. He was, big in the game last night against Spurs. But how about Ivica Zubac? And you mentioned him as a high floor player. I don't know, man. I think this guy has a higher ceiling than maybe we knew. 2020 against Wemby, 21 points, 22 rebounds. But he's been putting up this kind of stuff, these sorts of numbers consistently, basically his entire Clippers tenure. And in particular, his pick and roll stuff with James Harden is like, if that's different, it's very hard to guard. Ivica Zubac has turned into sort of like this very important piece, I think, for the Clippers' success.
Yeah, he is. I described him in a story that I wrote earlier this week at The Athletic as arguably the most indispensable player on the team. It's no disrespect to the other candidates that could fill that role, but we've seen James Harden be off the floor and other guys handle the ball. We've seen Norman Powell miss games and James Harden, for example, drop 40 or something. Kawhi didn't play before January. But if this is Zubac, there's not another center on the Clippers who've even played 20 minutes in a game, let alone what the heck this team would do if Zoo had to miss real time. And he's an example of a player who, under multiple coaches, under so many point guards, like the point guard position for the Clippers used to be a revolving door on an annual basis. He's always quietly put the work in. And for so long, it's just a matter of great post player, for a guy who doesn't get the touches.
Right.
Great pick and roll player for a team that doesn't run the pick and rolls because they don't have a player who is a primary playmaker and able to take advantage and make sound decisions on a basis that lets a coach like T. Lue trust that player. Okay. Not to name names. You've seen the basketball this team has played.
Mm-hmm.
So now, it's a credit to Zoo. It's a credit to T. Lue. It's a credit to James Harden. James Harden gets in the gym with these guys and he drills them. And as good as Zoo was in previous versions of this team had a gaping hole to fill in terms of someone who needed to, be featured offensively. And that combined with the work that those guys put in starting when James got to the team and, got the point guard mantle undisputedly last season. And now you just have a guy who is at the perfect intersection of skill and opportunity. He's a skilled player. He's not this oaf who's just happens to luck into some buckets. He's a guy who has a jump hook. He has a spin move. He has an ability to plant his pivot foot, go one way, dream shake, you come back the third way. And that's what's great. He's still got another level to do too. Like, I congratulate him on the and one. He didn't want to hear it tonight, but he was checking that last 2-minute report after Phoenix. So, it ain't shade at all. He can get to the free throw line better. He can make free throws at a more consistent rate. But even when he's playing at the short roll, like he's got games where he's racking up, more than 3 assists per game. He is, and then we're talking about offense when he's anchored the second best defense in the NBA. Okay. Right. So, he's a complete player, from the center position outside of the fact that he's a non-threat shooting the basketball outside the paint. Like, besides that, he does everything that you ask him to do. And I doubt he gets rewarded with the All-Star selection, but I think he's got bigger goals. And I think he's got another goal, and that's to be an all-defensive team rep.
He's been the most consistent player in all of the starting lineups. Like, if he's playing, he's starting, and he's been that consistent. I think in the things that you mentioned, Law, you didn't even mention the thing that he does the best, the offensive rebounding. Yeah. Right. The way that I've heard the term, he has a nose for the ball. He finds a way off of the pick and roll and just kind of creeps in front of the defense. As soon as the ball goes up, he's pushing people back. But that's a lot of work. I remember what it was like to O-board and hold down the defense and do all the things. That's a lot of work for. Listen, no. I'm just saying.
For summer. We're going to do that in the summer.
At some point, you have to think about who's coming up behind him. You just mentioned that there's been no other centers that are clocking 20 minutes. I'm thinking, are the Clippers looking for a big at the deadline? What are they looking for to fill out this team?
That's the thing that makes the most sense. I mean, this is not a team that is going to go for broke. We saw that team last year, where they maxed out on the players that they could get. And so they're trying to be responsible. This is the new CBA. We keep saying new because we keep seeing things that we're not used to conventionally seeing as far as behavior from teams. The Clippers are just one example. You saw the Warriors say bye to Klay Thompson. You saw the Minnesota Timberwolves trade Karl-Anthony Towns for a player that everyone knows not as great a fit as Karl-Anthony Towns proved to be for a team that made a Western Conference Finals run. There will be more. And so the Clippers are trying to understand that, hey, we have a way to be competitive now. And maybe there's another ceiling because you haven't seen Kawhi Leonard finish a playoff series with Tyronn Lue as the head coach or with a guy like James as the point guard. Like, who knows what this team could do in a 7-game series, but you have to be responsible when you're building your team. Now, that being said, there's a lot of money on that bench not contributing. And so it behooves the Clippers to explore ways to balance or just, give this team a chance because you need a better Ivica Zubac insurance. Like, Mo Bamba's a player who is an NBA player, but he's only played 1,000 minutes once.
He's got no availability.
Being a lottery pick, I mean, even when he's available, like, Mo's just not out there to fill more than 15 minutes in any given game. But what's tricky, Zena and Dave, is that the backup center role isn't just having a Mo Bamba-sized person. What do these second units do? they downsize and they throw your junk lineups out there, and you have to be cognizant of playoff basketball. Is there a player that fits that intersection of you could start in the pinch, but you can also play in lineups that mirror what your role might be if you're going to be on this team, especially in a playoff setting? That's going to be tricky, but I think that's what the Clippers are trying to figure out over the next 8 days. Yeah,
you got any names you want to throw out before we get out of here? Come on, break some news.
John Collins is the theory player.
Okay.
Right? I just don't know if he's the in-practice player because John has his weaknesses. People have talked about a Day'Ron Sharpe. I just don't think Day'Ron Sharpe is a player who can elevate his game too much.
Yeah, a little too one-dimensional for what the Clippers need.
Right. And that's the thing. I think it's going to have to be something outside the park. And you know what? I'm also bracing myself for this being the first time that the Clippers don't make a move at the deadline. But I feel like, again, there's literally a guy on the team who is making $11 million and hasn't been with them since Honolulu. So something's got to give. And I'm willing to just, I can't wait to analyze it instead of keep on prognosticating it.
Well, we will definitely going to talk to you on trade deadline day. I think we're going to do a big stream and Law's going to come hang out at some point during the day. So hopefully the Clippers make a move, or maybe they look at Kawhi and they say, hey, he's our big in-season move and we've got him healthy and we get to see this thing play out. Either way, you can go and read Law Murray over at The Athletic. He's got the Clippers covered. He's got more than just that. Mid-season power rank has just dropped. Who was number one?
The Oklahoma City Thunder for now.
Are they still number one now that they lost to the Warriors?
I filed that thing Tuesday morning. So,
all right.
Let's see.
They're number one until next week. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today's show, folks. Thank you, Law Murray, for hanging out. Thanks to Sam Amick, who hung out with us as well and updated us on DR and Fox. For Zena Keita, I'm Dave DuFour, and this has been the NBA Daily. Thanks for waking up with us.